Here I am again. I'm slightly less hairy, but I'm still the same old me. So I've learned a lot over the last couple of weeks regarding this channel and sort of made some decisions about the direction I'm going to be taking. Being that a lot of my older content was doing really well over the month of Halloween, since it was a lot of horror movie based things, I was thinking about how I'm sort of more in the realm of movie-related things as it is. I really love my podcast, Diary of a Cinephile. I've tried this already before because I have at least a dozen of these older videos that I really do like, and I put a lot of hard work into them. And the fact that a lot of people really like them just means the world to me. So I'm going to post some more, which starts with this one. Now, like the other ones, it's a little dated simply because when I made the video, a lot of these sequels that it's going to be about weren't released yet. It's going to be obvious that some are already out and have already either been successful or unsuccessful. A lot of them are still sort of rumors or in a pre-production stage, maybe even just still being written in a way. But if you're coming back and you really enjoyed some of those older videos, I think you're going to find a lot of enjoyment in this one as well. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate you. One of the most asked questions when a movie comes out is often, does this have the ability to have a sequel? Some stories do, some don't. Whether that be the case or not, we often see that production studios don't really care if it makes sense, as long as it makes money. So sometimes, there's sequels that no one asked for. A big example of that is Coming to America. Out of all the Eddie Murphy films to get sequels, why this one? If he wanted to make a comeback, I'm sure they could give sequels to any other film of his, but Coming to America? That film was perfect as it is. I could even see The Golden Child being better for a sequel, or The Haunted House. And not just talking about one-off films, but why not another 48 Hours, or Beverly Hills Cop? Keanu Reeves is the leading role of bringing back sequels to previous films of his career, and they make sense. But if he made a Point Break 2, that would be ridiculous. And the craziest part about this? These aren't the only examples of sequels that we're supposed to be getting that just don't make any sense. So, I put together a list of 10 film sequels in the works that no one asked for. I put this list together following 3 basic rules. Rule number 1, these are films that are either in post-production or just on the docket to start moving forward, but nothing has really come of most of them, except that they are planned. Rule number 2, I couldn't restrict the list to just sequels, so some of them are the 3rd part, and in some cases, the 7th part. But they are sequels to whatever the last iteration of the film was. And rule number 3, this is going to be highly opinionated, and some people might actually be looking forward to a few of these films. So I specifically made this list out of 10 films that I feel are unnecessary. And out of the apparent 100+ planned sequels by multiple production companies, these are the ones that just don't make any sense to me. Let's kick it off with Rocky 7. I'm a huge fan of the Rocky series. It's probably one of my favorite boxing films of all time. I also love the torch-passing series they are working on, Creed. The first 2 films of Creed are amazing, and they have a 3rd in the works. But for some reason, Sylvester Stallone has said on multiple occasions that one of the sequels he's working on is another Rocky. That would make it Rocky 7. After what they are doing with Rocky in the Creed series, that just doesn't make any sense. Unless he plans on bringing back his son and training him to be a fighter, making another Rocky film completely shits all over what they are doing with the Creed series, and I hope it's not going to move forward. Speaking of Sylvester Stallone, let's talk about Demolition Man 2. Along with Rocky, Stallone is apparently working on a sequel to this one-off wonder from the 90s. And don't get me wrong, I actually don't mind this idea so much, but it would have made more sense back then. Demolition Man is a great film, but a sequel now, almost 30 years since the first one, it's kinda weird. And I get that Stallone is a talented individual who writes all of these scripts himself, but I'd rather his focus be on another star-infused, action-orientated Expendables film than on a 1993 film that was great left as it was. Again, it's a good movie to feed off, take that world and create a sequel, but now, it just doesn't make sense. Side note, he is working on an Expendables 4. Next up, The Hitman's Bodyguard 2. This random insult fest between Ryan Reynolds and Samuel L. Jackson came out of nowhere, and no one complained. This film is so much fun, and its premise is quite inventive. An assassin is in custody, so they hire a famous bodyguard to bring him to court to put a bad guy in jail. But the bad guy sends killers after the assassin, and the two work together to make it across the city. It's a really fun film. But a sequel? Just because it was successful doesn't mean it needs to further the story. There is no opening for a sequel in what was created in this first film. Unless the goal is to use Ryan Reynolds' character to bodyguard a completely different assassin, sort of how the Has Fallen series has continued to use Gerard Butler, and still make it make sense, then yeah, maybe that sequel would work. But I doubt anyone besides Reynolds and Jackson would give us the same satisfaction in a sequel that the first film gave us. Following that one up with Wedding Crashers 2. I know exactly how this would work. It ended with both the Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson characters falling in love and getting out of the wedding crashing business. Now, 15 years later, they are both divorced and decided to get back out there and do what they love doing. Insert another Will Ferrell cameo.
Ma, the meatloaf! Fuck!
And that's the sequel. And that's how I imagine they would do it. And that sucks. Why would you do that? Just leave this one alone. It was great then. I don't even want a passing of the torch film where two new guys are the main focus. Just leave it alone. This film was fine as a one-off. Another one that was fine as a one-off, Now You See Me 3. I enjoy movies about magic. I think there is still a place for them, even though the big magic craze that was the late 90s and early 2000s would have been a better place for films like this. They are still enjoyable. However, the first one was fine. The first one had a solid ending. The sequel was a wash. It didn't have the same flair, the same feeling. The best parts were all the Mentalist scenes. They were so good, there's a Mentalist show that came out shortly after. If they did a completely separate movie of Woody Harrelson as the Mentalist, yes, I would watch that. But after the abysmal second part, they're planning a third part. That doesn't make any sense to me. Again, I will say, just because it was successful doesn't mean you can keep riding the success of the first one. Just leave it alone. Speaking of films I wish they left alone, Paranormal Activity 7. To be honest, this hurts my heart. I loved the first 3 films in this franchise, and the third one is hard for me to give, but I was okay with it. The first 2 are truly where my allegiance to this franchise lies. After that, I have watched them, but yeah, they're abominations. None of them make sense to the original timeline or story premise set by the first 2 films. And the first film was only supposed to be a one-off. I don't believe the writer or director thought outside of the first installment. Now they're up to 6 films, and a 7th is meant to be released in 2022. The further they bring this story, the further I become more upset by how they just don't care about it. I just want them to end it. And maybe that's me. Maybe you don't care so much about whether the films make sense or not. Whatever your feelings are, leave a comment below and let me know what you think. Now let's talk about this next one, Jurassic World 3. Talk about a cash grab. I'm not gonna lie, the first one made sense, and it was enjoyable. I can see the appeal of wanting to make more because this was actually a sequel to the original series that was written well enough in context of what would come next in the story, logically. And yes, Jurassic Park becoming Jurassic World and actually opening to the public, yes, that's amazing. Let's do that. But let's do that once. Stop there. You don't need another one. But they gave us another one, and they have another one coming. And that's not even just my opinion. Jurassic World 2 is riddled with mixed reviews, ranging from complete praise to completely shunning it. Unfortunately, it outdid the budget and made enough money that the studio thinks, why not? Let's do it again. And in my honest opinion, we don't need it. Next up, The Meg 2. The story of the Megalodon isn't too out of this world. I definitely enjoyed the first one for what it was. It wasn't going to win any Oscars or get recognized for a Golden Globe, but it was enjoyable, and it was fun. But a sequel? Sure, it was successful money-wise, but it is horribly reviewed, and making another one is just putting it in the realm of B-movies like Mega Shark vs. Giant Octopus. Leave it be with the first one. You don't need to further this plot. This is probably one that upsets me the most, Labyrinth 2. For a film that built a cult following and was a Jim Henson masterpiece, you would think they would leave it alone. It's the kind of film that withstands time and doesn't need much explanation. But we live in a time of nostalgia being a huge cash grab for companies in every market. Add that to the fact that there are still products today that sell out when connected to a film like The Labyrinth. Why not make a sequel? No. Just don't. Let this stay a rumor. David Bowie would turn in his grave if he knew what you were doing. Don't disgrace this film with whatever abomination you might conjure up to make a few extra dollars. Please don't. And last but not least, Passion of the Christ 2. Yes, this is real. It's called Passion of the Christ Resurrection, and it's meant to see Mel Gibson direct again, with Jim Caviezel starring. And it's apparently got the writer from Braveheart working on the script. The first still holds the title of being the most successful film in history, and Mel Gibson attempts to recapture that title almost 17 years later. I really have no words for this, and if you are a fan, you might be looking forward to it, but if you ask me, this is the kind of film that should be left alone. I have one quick honorable mention: Avatar. Avatar has 4 sequels planned. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I get that when the first one came out, it broke boundaries. I get that it was visually stunning. Honestly, I thought it was okay. I didn't lose my mind over it because I felt its main selling point was outside of the actual film. When you watch the movie for what it is, it's a mediocre, overdone concept. It's The Last Samurai. It's Fern Gully. It's Dances with Wolves. It's been done, and it's nothing special. Why 4 sequels are planned is beyond me, and the reason this is just an honorable mention is I know this has a huge following. I know there are people that still praise this film 12 years later, and perhaps you agree with a good portion of the films on this list, but I knew this would be the one where I might lose you a little bit. And again, this is truly my opinion, but I think Avatar should be a one-off. However, there is a sequel set for a 2022 release, and subsequent sequels following every year or so after. If you're looking forward to all of them, if any of these apparent sequels shocked you a bit, and if you know of other sequels coming out that just don't make any sense to you, let me hear it down in the comments. Give the video a like if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Jesse, and if Flix could talk, here's what they would say.